Hello, and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Channel powered by Nioxus Corporation. My name is Andy. I'm a Ninox programmer and trainer here at Nioxus Corporation. And in today's class, we're going to do something really fun. It's an easy way to add a powerful graphic visual layer or level to any database that you build in Ninox. You can do this in any database, and this is going to be an easy way for you to kind of take your user experience to the next level. Now, before we get started, I want to point out that you can go to our website, www.nioxus.com, click on Login, select Nioxus Member Portal, and log in to either our Standard, Deluxe, or Premier portal. And once you get there, go under Templates, and you can download the Badges and Stamps template. You can do that right now and follow along, or you can replay the video and download and follow along at that time. But the template that you're going to see us using here today, along with all of the code, it's completely unlocked. It's free for all of our members. So go ahead and check it out. And I think you're going to find this to be a great way to add some real zing to your Ninox database. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go in, and let me explain what I mean by badges and stamps. It is very common in just about every database and most of, if not all of the tables in a database, to have this concept of a status. Whether it's an invoice, which is what we're going to be working with here today, and we have status of past due and paid in full or payment due, as you see right up here. Or maybe it's a customer. We have active status, on hold status, in collection status, or maybe it's an employee, current employee, former employee, or maybe we have an intern who could be a future employee. But this concept of grouping, of creating clusters or groups of records based on a status or a current state code of some kind, very, very common. Now, we're used to doing this using a choice field. You can go into a choice field either clicking on a button in the ribbon or clicking on the down arrow to open up the choice field and select one or even multiple choices. And you can define the status of, again, say an invoice, which is what we're going to be working with here today, based on selecting a status code. When we talk about stamps or badges, I'm talking about something like this, where we have a paid stamp or a past due stamp. We can note partial payments or when payments are due, and an invoice that's been canceled has a stamp that looks just like that. So this ability to add these nice big badges, these ink stamps, if you will, it's digital ink, but it's a stamp nonetheless. The ability to stamp a record, to put a stamp on the screen of payment due, or invoice canceled, or active client, or past client. This is a simple, easy way, as I said, to add a powerful, colorful, and very visual aspect to the user interface, to the user experience. So let's look at how this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and create a new invoice, and I'm going to go ahead and go into full screen mode. We'll give this an invoice number, and the invoice date, let's say, is the first of the month, and the due date is the end of the month. We have invoice charges of $1,500, shipping and handling of 10% for $150, another $75 in sales tax. So on $1,500 worth of goods and services that are being invoiced, we have a current balance due of $1,725. Now you will note that payments received is 0. There have no payments have been made. The invoice is not late, it's not due until the end of the month, but a payment of some kind might be due. So we have the payment due stamp. Compare this to the stamp we use for an open invoice when the balance due is 0, where the total charges is 0. This just shows us an open invoice. Now, when would we want to have the open stamp? Maybe it's a quote. And when we turn the quote into an invoice, it then would go from open to payment due. Or we might use open for things like picking tickets or packing slip. It's an open ticket until we've got everything in the box, and once we close the box and seal it, it's now a closed packing ticket. So you can use these open and closed and canceled and payment due and payment received. You can use these stamps, or as we call them, badges, in a variety of different tables, whether you're dealing with human resources or fraternity membership or sales or purchasing. Doesn't really matter what it is. Anytime you are categorizing records into groups, open invoices are categorized differently from canceled, categorized differently from partially paid, you can use these stamps and it adds a really nice touch to the system. So that's what a stamp is. Now let's look at all of the stamps that we have built into our system. Again, when we have an invoice number and an invoice date and a due date, but we haven't indicated any charges, this is an open document. Now, if we decided we were going to cancel this document, we did not want to reuse the invoice number. So we're going to keep this document in the file, but go ahead and cancel it. We flip the cancel switch, and our badge goes from open to canceled. If it is an open order, and it is an actual invoiced order, so like we might have $750 in charges, it goes from open to payment being due. Now it's not past due because this invoice isn't really due for full payment until the end of the month, and it's not the end of the month yet. Let's say we have, however, received a partial payment. 50% has been paid as a deposit. So we have received a partial payment. We're not past due, we're not paid in full, but we don't have a situation where we're still waiting for some kind of payment to be made in any amount. A payment is not due, but a partial payment has been received. At any time, as I showed you, we could cancel this invoice. This switch overrides everything happening here. Now, right now, we have received a partial payment. There's still a balance due, but the due date is in the future. If this had been due yesterday on the 12th, it would now be past due. Not because anything has changed in the amount, but because things have changed with respect to the date. Today is a day after the date final payment was expected. It therefore is past due. If, however, today were a day prior to the date when final and full payment was expected, we would just note we have received a partial payment. It's not paid in full, it's not behind schedule. Finally, when the full payments have been received, when we can add an additional 400 and on an invoice of 750, we can show payments received of 750, it now is a fully paid invoice. And at this point, the due date doesn't matter because it's no longer due. It's been paid in full. Now, you will note that these stamps, these badges, work particularly well when you can display them fairly large on the screen. We still have a status field called current status where we use text. The reason being, the badges don't necessarily display quite as nicely, and we have this field here called status badge. They don't display quite as nicely on a listing as they would, say, for the text in a listing and then the badge blown up nice and big on the screen. So these don't necessarily replace the choice or the text field. They are an enhancement to the system where you can use the badge or this digital ink stamp, if you will, for the form, and you can use the text for the listing. I will also tell you that these stamps translate very nicely onto the individual printouts or the PDFs. You can go ahead and add the visual graphic stamp, that paid in full or past due or canceled badge in full color. You can go ahead and add those to your print forms also. And the same way it adds a nice dimension to the screen, it adds an equally powerful, colorful, and intuitive, but most important, easy to see status badge right there on a PDF printout. So how do we do this? Well, there's a couple of steps involved. Let's dive in and see the easy way that we can make this work. The first thing we have to do is we have to have the stamps themselves in the system. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my desktop, and I'm going to go into administrative mode. And you will note we have a couple of hidden tables. The hidden table that I'm interested in today is the badges table. This table has one record, and that one record has 6 fields. And all 6 of these fields are image fields. It's very simple. Place an image field on the screen, name the image field. I'm just going to size that up like that. Save it. I might name this, how about canceled version 2, and then save your changes, click on the image field, and select the badge. I'll go here and I'll select this stamp, and now we have that appearing in our screen. You'll notice, however, that this particular badge does not have the right colored background. It is very important when creating your badges, and I'm going to show you in just a moment how we do that. When creating your badges, it's very important, if you want them to blend nicely onto the background, that you match the background in the graphic that is this image, this badge, that you match it with the background color of the screen on which it is going to appear. And remember, if you want your badges to appear both on screen and in your print formats, you'll probably need 2 versions of every badge. One with the background color of the screen form, and this happens to be the standard Ninox gray, which is code 237, as we'll see in a moment. But then for our printout forms, we have to have one that has a background of white. Data entry forms, on-screen forms, are usually some shade of gray, or sometimes we'll use a color. The form is always white. Now you can avoid having 2 sets of badges if you go in and make your on-screen form with a white background. Then it'll work either way. But if your on-screen form does not have a white background and you want to include badges both digitally on the screen and physically on the PDF printouts, you're going to want to match the backgrounds. Now this is a personal style decision. I happen to like it when my badge looks like it's been stamped right on the page. It doesn't have a white box around it, clearly indicating it's more of an image. Again, it's just a nice, clean look. If you want your badges or your digital stamps to have a different color background, you certainly can. But again, step 1, we have this hidden table. I call it badges, you can call it stamps, you can call it graphics, images, buttons, whatever you want to call it. But create a separate image field, each one uniquely named, for each individual badge you're going to have in the system. And I just got rid of that version 2 canceled badge. This is the canceled badge for this particular invoicing application that we're building. So now we have the badges in the system, if you will. We do this for 2 reasons. First of all, the same badge can now be called on multiple screens. If you're building a system that has customers, volunteers, vendors, and employees. All four of those types of human beings might have a status: current, active, inactive, former. You don't need four different badges. You just need one badge that stamps current and another badge for former, a badge for on hold, or a badge for active. And you can reuse that same badge, this same digital stamp, over and over and over again by storing the stamps in a separate table and then simply hiding the table. We're not going to do anything with it once it's been built. And you only want the administrator to have control over these badges. So we go ahead and under table management, we click hidden to hide this table away from any user who is not an administrator. We exit administrative mode, and as we would expect, this badge table is now gone and hidden from view completely. The next step is to then call the badge or retrieve the badge that's now been stored in that table and stamp it onto the screen where we want it to appear. Now, in this particular instance, as we saw a moment ago, we have 6 badges, but only one badge appears at a time. It's open or it's canceled. It is currently, and we have to drop a due date in there, currently a payment is due, or it's past due. And if a payment is due, it might be the first payment, or we might be looking for the final payment because a partial payment has already been received. 6 badges in the system, 6 graphic digital stamps we can stamp onto this invoice, but only one appears at a time. And how does the system decide, when given some choices, what to do? We use our decision structure, and there are 2 of them. There is the case switch and the if-then. Now, while the case switch is a little more compact, it's a little more efficient in terms of writing code, this is actually much better done, much easier to accomplish using nested if-thens. We have 6 badges. We're going to have 6 if-then statements, 5 nested inside of the top one. Each different if-then addresses a different scenario, a different current state of this invoice. And based on the current state at any point in time, Ninox knows automatically which badge to select. Let's go back into administrative mode, and we will see that this is a formula. This is not an image field. The image fields were stored here in this hidden badges table. These are the original, or the source of our graphic elements. These are the originals, and these originals are indeed stored in an image field. But there are some characteristics of the formula field that lend itself very nicely to actually stamping or placing these badges on the screen. And let's look at those characteristics. The first one is, most importantly, we can control the background color. As a formula, we can control the background color of the badge. Now, as I said, these particular badges, when I created these JPEGs, were created with the background color, the standard 237 RGB code that is the standard default gray for Ninox. If our background were in fact set to white, it would look like that. Or we could set the badge to white, put it on a white field, put a frame around it. We might want to do it that way. But now it looks more like a JPEG element and less like a stamp that we're used to stamping on the page. And I happen to like that physical ink stamp look. So again, we can go into style. Style is not an option for image fields, but it is an option for formula fields. Change the background to 237 RGB, and there now everything just kind of has this invisible look as if the stamp were physically applied to the page itself, and there it is. And I like that. The other thing that we can do with formulas, even when those formulas are acting as images, we have a little more flexibility in how we position them on the screen. So you could have 6 different image fields in the invoice table, and you could use the display if, the visibility invisibility switch on each of the fields to make sure that 5 are invisible and only 1 is visible at a time. But the disadvantage of that is, first of all, you can't edit the background color of an image. Second of all, you'd have to repeat those image fields in every table. Again, if you have customer invoices, vendor invoices, purchase orders, packing slips, picking tickets, and shipping notices, 6 different kinds of documents, and every one of them can be active, canceled, or closed. Instead of having 3 image fields that are identical in 6 different tables, creating 18 images in total, we just take those 3 images, active, canceled, and closed, put them in one place, one time, the hidden table. We called it badges, you can call it whatever you like, and we refer through this formula to the table. So let's now look at the actual reference. As I said, we have nested 6 if-thens inside of each other. Now the first one is the easiest one, and that is canceled. If this yes/no field is yes, if the invoice has been canceled, that basically trumps everything else. Doesn't matter if it's not paid, fully paid, half paid, whatever. If we cancel the invoice, it is canceled. End of story. The first option is the invoice total is greater than 0, payments are equal to 0, and the due date is in the future. What this means is we've sold them something. Invoice total is greater than 0. They have not made any payments. Payments equals 0. And the due date is greater than today's current date. The due date is in the future, which means we want to select from the badges table the payment due badge. The next if it's not canceled and if it's not payment due, let's see if it's paid in full. If the invoice amount is greater than 0, which means something has been sold, and the amount of payments received is equal to the total amount of the invoice, it's now paid in full. You will note for these first 3, the due date is irrelevant. If the canceled switch is yes, it's canceled. If it's not past due and something has been sold, so the invoice total is an amount greater than 0 but no payments have been made, a payment is due. And if the invoice total, again, is greater than 0 and payments equals invoice total, then it's paid in full. The next 2 have to take the due date into consideration. The balance due, and just so you understand, the balance due is a formula equal to the invoice total minus payments received. If the balance due is greater than 0 and the due date is less than the current date, the due date is in the past. So the balance due is greater than 0. We are owed money, but the date by which it should have been paid has now passed. Therefore, we are going to select from that hidden badges table the past due badge. Conversely, the exact opposite. balance due is greater than 0, but the due date is in the future. So if balance due is greater than 0 and the due date is in the future, it's partially paid. And finally, if the invoice total equals 0, that means nothing's been sold. Maybe it's a quote, maybe it's an estimate. For whatever reason, there is no dollars being charged and therefore no dollars due for payment. We will select the open badge. And that's all there is to it. The system will then evaluate, is it canceled? No, it's not. Is money due, but it's not past due? Then we just say a payment is due. Well, was money due, but all of that money has been paid? Payments equal the total amount that was due. Well, then it got paid in full. Well, if there is a balance due and the due date is in the past, then it's past due. That's different than payment due. Past due says balance due is greater than 0 and the time in which you were supposed to pay has expired. Versus this first one, the balance due is greater than 0, but the due date is still in our future. Then we see the fifth choice. The balance due is greater than 0, but the due date is in the future. The balance due is not 0, which means it's not completely unpaid, but the balance due is greater than 0, but it's not past due. Therefore, we select partially paid. And if all 5 of these states of being prove to be false, there's only one thing left that can be open. And open is equal to the invoice total being 0. So that is how we handle the badging or the digital stamps that we put on the screen. Now, as I'd indicated and shown you just a moment ago, we still use a status field. The stamps don't really work as nicely in this sort of listing. If we have different views, a Kanban or a card view, actually they work very nicely in card views. That nice big graphic really works very well. But there's some views, the listing view, the Kanban view, where the graphic stamp is simply either completely inappropriate or it's just going to be displayed so small that you can't even read it. So we still do want to have this textual presentation of the current status of the invoice or the employee or the purchase order or the pick ticket, whatever it is that you're stamping and status managing. And the way we do this is really simple. Once we have created the formula, this series of if-thans nested inside of each other, we can then copy that formula, create a new formula, paste it, and now simply change what happens in each condition. The conditions remain the same, and there are 6. An invoice is canceled, or it is not fully paid, but it's not past due, or it has been paid in full, or no payments have been made and the due date is behind us, or it's been partially paid, but it's still not past due, or none of the above. So the statuses don't change. What we do in the case of each status, however, does change. Now, I've already created this field. I hide it here on the form. I only use it when I need it here, when the stamp, when the badge is not appropriate. And all we do, and I'll go into Edit, and I'm going to go to the field called Text Status. Again, this is a hidden field. It uses the exact same construct of 6 embedded if-then statements, but instead of selecting a badge, instead of selecting a field in that hidden table, it presents a hard-coded character string. These hard-coded character strings are enclosed front and back with double quotation marks. So if the yes/no field for canceled invoice is yes, the word canceled appears. If the balance due is greater than 0 and the due date is in the future, the words partial pay appears. And if the due date is in the past, the words past due appear. Same exact states, same exact analysis of the due date, the balance outstanding, the invoice total. But what we want Ninox to do as a result of the analysis of those states is different. Don't select and present a graphic, present a piece of hard-coded text. We then hide this field by just saying display field only if null, which means never. There is no scenario by which this field is going to be visible on screen. And then, when the stamp is not what we want to use, we can just go in, and I'll hide this, go in, show the column, select text status. I will rename that as current status. And there we have it, the best of both worlds. The textual version of current status, as well as this digital ink stamp, this digital badge, which graphically presents the current status. Where do we get these stamps? Well, before we leave today, let's take a quick look at that. What I do is I will go to the internet, and I'm going to do that now with a new table, and I'll just Google, I'll look for open stamp, and here's any variety of open stamps in a variety of colors, with check marks, without check marks, in green, in red, round as a badge, a variety of different options. However, you must make sure that if you're going to reuse or copy one of these stamps, you are copying one that is free for reuse, or you have paid the copyright fee to the person that created the graphic. And you can go in under Tools and you can search by user rights, and you can search for free for non-commercial use, free for commercial use, or if you are graphically and artistically inclined, which I absolutely am not, you could create your own badges. Just remember the background of the JPEG, and badges must be JPEGs. You can't use PNGs, you can't use vector graphics, it must be a JPEG. The background color of the JPEG is going to be the background color as it appears on your screen and potentially on the form. So for example, this open badge has a non-white background. If you want to use this badge on a printout form, you need to remove this light gray background, replace it with a pure white background so it appears to be stamped right on the PDF page. But that's all I do, is we go in, we Google search, make sure you're not using something that someone else is trying to make a living by selling. If it's free, of course, go ahead and use it. If it's not free, pay the fee or don't use it. But all of these stamps are readily available. You can find an open stamp. We can find stamps for paid. We can find stamps for past due. And you have so many different options. And again, if you have any artistic capability, you can create a set of stamps to meet your specific and unique needs. And that is how we take these badges and add this graphic element to invoices, to employee records, to volunteer and vendor and supplier and customer records. It's simple, it's easy, it adds a powerful and colorful component to the user interface, and it adds a degree of intuitiveness, of understandability to the overall user experience. Thank you very much for joining me here today in our class. We'll have new videos out in the weeks ahead. And in the meantime, please stay safe, please stay healthy. Do enjoy creating some great Ninox databases. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly at Nioxus or any of our support professionals, or go to our website, www.nioxus.com, Nioxus.com. Sign up for a membership, download our free templates, take a look at our fantastic user's manual, or feel free to send in a help ticket, and our experts at the Help Center will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being part of the Ninox community, and thank you for supporting the work we do here at Nioxus Corporation. I look forward to seeing you very soon in the classroom, and until then, you have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.